let's talk about one of the most famous and maybe most misunderstood ideas in all of philosophy, the leap of faith. You've heard this phrase a million times, right? It conjures up this image of a blind jump into the unknown. But today, we're going to dig into what it really means, and the answer might seriously surprise you. Yeah, this is the picture we all have in our heads, isn't it? It's this dramatic, almost desperate act, closing your eyes, jumping off a cliff, and just hoping for the best. It basically paints faith as the total opposite of reason. But what if that whole idea is just wrong? And here is the twist. Søren Kierkegaard, the guy whose name is practically synonymous with the leap of faith, he never actually used that phrase. Not once, seriously. And that little fact is the key that unlocks what he was actually trying to say. So let's just go ahead and bust that myth right now, the myth of the blind, irrational jump. And let's find out what Kierkegaard was really talking about, because it's honestly so much deeper and more interesting. Okay, so to get Kierkegaard's big idea, we first have to understand the world he was living in. We've got to take a little trip back to 19th century Denmark, a place where being a Christian wasn't really a choice. It was more like the factory default setting. I mean, you gotta love that line. For Kierkegaard, faith had become way too easy, way too comfortable. It was just part of the culture. You were born a Dane, you were born a Christian. It didn't demand any passion or struggle or any real personal decision. It was just there. And this absolutely drove him nuts. And this chart really gets to the heart of it. On one side, you've got the standard Christianity of his day, just a cultural habit, a checklist of beliefs you nod along to. But what Kierkegaard was calling for, what he called Christian existence, was something totally different. It had to be a passionate, all-in commitment that transformed your entire life. It had to involve your whole self, not just be some idea you agree with. So before we can really redefine this whole leap thing, we have to get our heads around a pretty radical idea Kierkegaard had about the nature of truth itself. This is, no joke, the foundation for everything else. Kierkegaard famously said, "Truth is subjectivity." Now hang on, that does not mean truth is just whatever you feel like it is. Not at all. What he meant was that the most important truths, the big ones, about love and purpose and God, aren't like scientific facts you can prove in a lab. They're truths that only become real when you personally, passionately commit to them. It's less about what you believe and more about how you live it. You know, just to see how different this was, think about a philosopher like Descartes. His whole goal was to doubt everything until he found one single, provable, objective fact. I think, therefore I am. Kierkegaard just completely flips that on its head. He says, for the big questions in life, trying to get rid of all doubt is a waste of time. The real goal is to find a truth that you are willing to live and die for, and that means you have to passionately embrace a certain amount of uncertainty. All right, so now that we have that foundation, we can finally redefine the leap, and the best way to do it is with a fantastic analogy that Kierkegaard himself used. This right here is the absolute key. The leap isn't anti-reason. It's not about throwing your brain out the window. It's the final personal step you have to take after your intellect and all your research have taken you as far as they can possibly go. Think of it like learning to swim. You can do all the homework, right? You can read every book on hydrodynamics, you can study videos of every stroke, you can even get lessons on dry land from an Olympic champion. You can know everything there is to know about swimming. But guess what? None of that actually makes you a swimmer. Sooner or later, you have to stand at the edge of the pool and make the personal decision to jump in. That plunge, that's the leap. So, Kierkegaard took this logic and applied it to what he considered the most intense story of faith ever told. A story that just absolutely shatters our normal ideas of reason and ethics. Of course, he's talking about the story of Abraham and Isaac, where God commands Abraham to sacrifice his own son. Now, for Kierkegaard, this was way more than just a simple test of obedience. It was a collision of two completely separate realities. See, on one side, you have the ethical world, and in that world, the rule is simple and universal. A father must love and protect his son. Period. The command to kill him is just morally insane. But then you have the religious world, which demands an absolute personal faith in God. These two commands are totally at odds. You can't use logic to square this circle. They are in complete and total conflict. There was no logical argument Abraham could make to prove that what he was doing was right.
From an ethical standpoint, it was monstrously wrong. So he had to make a choice. He had to suspend the ethical just for a moment and place his trust entirely in his relationship with God. He made a leap, not by shutting off his brain, but by moving into a space of trust that his brain simply couldn't compute.
So, I know this is some heavy philosophical and religious stuff, but what on earth does it have to do with us, today, in our everyday lives? Well, as it turns out, it has everything to do with us. Because if you take away the specific religious context for a second, Kierkegaard's leap becomes this amazing metaphor for any huge life decision. You know, those moments where you've made all the pro-con lists, you've done all the research, but the final decision, it still comes down to a gut-level commitment of trust that goes way beyond the data. I mean, just think about it. Can you use a spreadsheet to prove with 100% certainty that you should marry someone, or that leaving a safe, boring job to chase a dream is the logical choice? Of course not. You gather all the evidence you can, you think it through, but at the end of the day, the final move is always a leap. It's a commitment of your whole self, based on a trust that goes beyond pure reason. It's that plunge into the water. So you see, the leap of faith isn't really about believing absurd things for no reason. It's about recognizing that the biggest, most important commitments we make in life, in our relationships, in our careers, in our beliefs, they always demand more than just our intellect. They demand our trust. They ask for our passion. They demand the plunge. So the real question Kierkegaard leaves us with is this: what are the leaps that you are willing to make?